joined by Arun, our partner at TagTaste. And Arun was kind enough to join me in taking you over the next few minutes. We're going to spend time in how do you create a combo or a food pairing. So we've actually worked on that over the past few months and created as part of our TagTaste processes. And this is what we are doing. So Arun, if you could please begin and then I'll join in.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Arun Tangri. I'm one of the co-founders of TagTaste, the company that we both represent right now. So the topic that we have selected is how to create a food combo. And we have been doing some work over the last 2-3 years in which we have tried to pair some food and beverage items, but we try to bring in some science behind it. So there is always an aspect of the sensory validation of the food, but then there is also a molecular or the chemistry level aspects around it. So we tried to devise a methodology in which if we could combine the science and then validate it using the sensory analysis, is it possible for us to find some sort of a combos which probably will do better when we put that across to the real consumers outside? So the idea was different brands were giving the combos based on their own perception. So let's say if you're going to a Burger King outlet, you're a vegetarian, you just order a veg Whopper, and which drink will you take? Which cola? So let's say the Pepsi is being served over there, you just go ahead and take a veg Whopper with Pepsi. But is it possible that the burger actually pairs better with Mirinda or a Mountain Dew or a Sprite or maybe Jazeera? You don't know, right? So what is the right way of finding those combos in a more scientific manner, and does that lead to the actual increase in the sales or the consumer expectations or the experience, is the topic that we are trying to cover here. Because of the lack of time, we won't be able to go too much deep into the numbers, but just to give you some idea, over the last 2 to 3 years, we have seen that the recommendations which are coming through the process that we are going to present to you right now has actually led in the increase of 10 to 15 to 20% sales in the brands or the outlets where these combos have been served. So there is a certain merit that we have been able to see using the process that we have followed, and that is what we are going to present. So over to you.
So we always have a dilemma as soon as we enter a restaurant or a QSR, because it has to be quick, the decision has to be quick. We know what food we're going to eat, but the beverage is basically you have to choose from what's behind the counter. And with that decision is then also affected by what you see on the board behind you. So how do they put those combos that you see on the board? Is it driven by just price or just flavor, or beyond flavor is what we need to understand so that we can move ahead. So we all understand in this room that flavor and chemistry are really important in this whole process. That's the basis of this. Taste, flavor, aromatics. What happens inside the mouth, what happens before you ingest the food is really, really important. Those aromas are important. Now all that science we all know is the science of chemistry, which is all the flavor compounds that create. Now what happens inside the mouth is a different ball game when they start to interact at different temperatures. So at the beginning of the exercise, it's really important to identify, as you say, what's the base of the product. If it's a burger, what goes inside the patty? Is it potato? Is it carrot? Is it peas? Is it a sweet potato? And what are the spices that go there? So it's really to understand the starting point. So we will take an example of a burger because that's the easiest thing right now in my mind. So if it's a potato patty or a chicken patty, what are the flavor compounds? So that's the beginning point, and that's what we got to first identify. In step 2, as you all understand from Flavor DB, and our app also does the same, is to create the rubrics or the map. The rubrics would be like a footprint or a spider chart. What are the characteristics of that particular product that we are going to be pairing the drink with? So that's the starting point of your flavor. So if you don't know the starting point, we wouldn't know the ending point, because the ending point has to be a refreshed bite or a great experience. So how do we create our experiences? Once we know where do we start with the So again, after we create a flavor map, which could be done on the app like ours or using a flavor TV, we know the starting point of those flavor compounds. Moving on to the next, can we just come to slide number 3? Complementary is the complementing or contrasting. Key issues, keywords. In India, we always say Indian food is really contrasting. All the entire coast on the other side of the Atlantic and the Western says complementing flavor. So why is that, and how do we use that, and what do we use? Do we use a complementing match or a clashing match, or in that sense? So the idea behind this is we have to think holistically. In India, we use a ton of spices. All those spices are working together as well as against each other. They are enhancing, complementing, as well as bringing the whole thing up. So now once we have contrasting spices in your base burger, would you like to pair it with a contrasting drink or a complementing drink? So it's really, I think, a risky job to pair it with a contrasting drink, because if you already have so much contrast within the burger patty, adding another contrasting flavor might need to a little kind of flavors from inside your mouth where we don't know the end result. So then we adopt the Western technology which says complementing is the way to go. And that's the way that has been used in for so many years with alcohol and wine. And we adopt that approach. Once your food is already contrasting, the next step has to be complementing, because we want a peaceful ending to that bite instead of adding so much that we cannot ingest. So after having, we can go back to the first steps. So after we understand what is the methodology that we demand out of the next sip of the beverage that we are going to pair, we need to do a plotting test or pairing of the conjoints. I mean, all of this whole process seems to be easy, but then if you are putting a beverage which is heavy in volatiles, it could be a Pepsi, or it could be a Coke, or it could be a Diet Coke. With a burger, the build is so complex. It's got the sugar, it's got the acids, it's got the volatiles. What will react with what is the key, and what will have the lasting effect inside the mouth is also critical. So keeping all of those in mind, in line with the pungency that is arising from the aeration, so then it creates like this whole equation which is like so wide that we need to understand where do we begin and where do we end, because again we are trying to give him a bite which is refreshing and want him to take the next bite. So with this idea, we cannot have it either too sour, too sweet, too spicy, or too pungent, because if it's as pungent as, say for example, a thumbs up, it just might kill your taste buds all in one if you have a big dose of chilies in it, because aeration or carbonation will push everything inside your mouth towards your trigeminal nerves and kill that bite. So that's the other thing. And the last, the human element cannot be ruled out. After we create a model, it has to be tested by the human element. After we take these few pairings to the human element and actually taste it, we get the real result out. Actually, we get a proof for the pudding. So again, as I've heard all morning, can the humans be replaced by a computer? Yes, up to a point, absolutely. But in the end, what happens inside the human mouth, that physiology is there, which as of today cannot be replaced by technology. So the human element will help create the validation for the program, but overall, the data will help us reach a point of choosing the best possible solution that we have out of the hundreds of options that we have. So yes, the data always helps us reach a point where we can actually see if this pairing is going to work or not. But the final pitch is going to be forwarded by the human after the tasting. And this is what we have learned from our experiences. And if you can go next. So as in flavor DB, we divide flavors into a multiple flavor wheel. We use these basic 14 character, or I would say 14. I'll say these are the character or the characteristic flavors of food, which is how we are able to define flavors instead of going into the deep science of what a actone is and into the molecular part. We stay with these names which help people identify what flavor they're going to expect out of it and what they're going to get delivered. So these three principles are really important, and the most important in my opinion is number 3, optimizing complexity, as we spoke about briefly earlier. At times when we eat food, it gives us a kick. It could be chili, it could be clove, it could be black pepper, and if you keep eating that, the hit reduces, and after a point of time, you barely see that taste in your mouth, or it changes into a different taste. So optimizing that hit has to be done accurately. If you keep on hitting the same flavor molecule in very high amounts, it will lead to a point where your taste buds cannot taste it again. So optimization of those things are really important. Aromatic complexity is what we understand really well in this room. Flavor DB is something which helps us accomplish this. We understand what added to what delivers what. So this is the aromatic complexity. And the third, the perceiving, how well you perceive certain complexes of flavors will change from, it will depend on the way you cook, it will depend on the base that is being cooked, it will depend on what temperature it is being served at, and it will also depend what mood the person eating it is in. So a bowl of chilies can be a blessing in a meal or can be punishment for a very few who are there. So we understand the way we cook will affect the way the outcome is going to be in that burger. Is it breaded? Is it crispy fried? Or does it have a batter coating, or does it have a panko coating? Will that coating or that spice, how the interaction of the volatile compound with the oil is going to be deciding how it's going to take the final shape inside your mouth. For example, that we see garlic, if it's crushed, gives us a certain flavor. If it hits oil straight on, it gives a different flavor. If it's inside a burger patty which is breaded, it will have a steamed effect because it's not coming in direct contact with the oil. So hence, these reactions will change excuse me, from bite to bite, from the way we cook, what base we are using, and there are n numbers of permutation and combinations, and this is where we have understood the whole flavor map and how we've been able to break it down into a process so that we can preempt what will be the best match. So a lot of people in this room have been part of the TagTaste tastings. We break down each tasting into different departments, I would say. We begin with the appearance. We try and capture all the the different ways in which you perceive food, the eyes, the nose, inside the mouth, the trigeminal hit, which is important, the astringency of food, the mouth feel, and then the texture. In the end, we also do measurement where we ask, how did this entire experience come together as? Was it a great experience? Or did it come together as a full team, or you only had a sporadic moment of pleasure? So if it's coming together in this entire big holistic way, then it's a good burger. If only the aromatics or the chewing or the texture is great, then it's an incomplete experience. And this way we are able to understand what the meaning of the word tasty or delicious is. We need to put a number to that, and this is how we derive that. By breaking it down into different departments, we're able to take a score for each department, which makes our pairing much easier to do.
So, Shiv, I have a question here.
Yes.
So we understand the concept of taste, we understand the concept of texture, aroma, flavors, or even the way the food is cooked. Can you take us through an example of, let's say, I created a burger, let's say a crispy burger with veg patty. How will I actually go ahead and use these principles to find out different beverages in which it is actually pairing better? So how do we actually do it on ground using the principle that we did?
Sure, absolutely. In fact, let's make it more interesting. We were just discussing biryani, so let's do it for biryani. Let's do it. What drink would you pair with your biryani? So let's understand what is the type of biryani, the base product, the rice. Is it a basmati rice? Or is it a hot grain rice? Is it a broken rice or more aromatic rice? So you need to begin with that. What is the base product? Now, how heavily is that seasoned? It could be seasoned with a bouquet which is dropped in the rice while making it and then being brought out, or are you adding a handful of whole spices into it? That will change the ball game. And next, what are the vegetables or the meats that are going to be going in there? Are they pre-cooked or are they being added along with the rice to be cooked? So small change, but it makes a big difference. How far are you going to be cooking the rice? What is the oil that you're going to be using? Are you going to be depending on the animal fat? Are you going to be adding a vegetable oil, or is it going to be a different oil? Because the oil coating on top of the rice will define how much flavor and starch and the speed of the release of that is going to be there in your mouth. And then accordingly you're going to have to pair the drink. For example, if you have a biryani which is a meaty biryani, it would have more animal fat in it, which would make it a little more greasy, which means you need a little more acid inside your drink to go across that. If it's a vegetable biryani, a nice and a light fluffy biryani, it doesn't have too much curd in it, then it's a different flavor. If you are flavoring that biryani already with citrus flavors, we're going to have to pair that with maybe a beverage which is a high citrus. It might not be Sprite, but it could be a Mountain Dew. So that complexity might move from a plain Nimbu Pani to a Mountain Dew, because you need that pungency to drive through the spices. In case of the meaty biryanis, if it has the animal fat, we just might need to depend on a Coke or maybe a drink based with a great amount of kokum, because we need that acidity to cut through all that animal fat and that heavy flavor. If it's a biryani, for example, a dampuk biryani, plain white biryani with pieces of meat in the layer with the spices not being too heavy, it's going to be a different beverage. We might be able to do with, I don't know, I have to think. Chef, what would be best with a white biryani? Maybe a curd-based beverage? It could work, but not too acidic, because if it's too acidic like a buttermilk, then it could be trouble. So yes, you have to know what goes into the base of a biryani, what is the fat, what is the vegetable, what are the toppings. Are you going to be adding the fried onions or not on top? Are you going to be adding that few sprigs of mint? Are you going to be making it aromatic? So we need to create the rubrics and then accordingly create a bridging of the molecular flavor with your drink. In my experience, if there is curd in the biryani, then a curd-based drink usually is the way to go, because it's a classic match. You have the dairy, the ghee already in the biryani, and you have the curd, so it's easy to just bring on a curd-based beverage. And hence, in many places, we just add a curd-based condiment onto our plates, like plain curd or raita. And this way, we're going to be doing our pairing as we do it.
Thank you, Chef. Just for the knowledge of all, we are actually in the middle of finding out such pairs for multiple brands. So, for example, right now we are conducting the pairing of the Burger King burgers. This will be followed by the Subway and Domino's and a few more brands. So, if you are interested in these kind of a topic and you want to see how these pairings are actually done on ground, you can install our app, and sorry for the promotion, but you can install the app and take part in it and actually learn these things on ground right now also. So, thank you for the session.
Yes.